I really, my mother and I really admire the character of Lorraine Baines because, yeah, Back to the Future's female audience doesn't need to be mad at this film for having two white male co-leads if the female characters are also written well, which they definitely were. Lorraine Baines is a girl who had some real depth to her as a character. In 1985, she acted like her mom, who, she liked the way her mom did, discouraging Marty from, chasing girls or sitting in parked cars with them. But when Marty McFly saw her in 1955, Lorraine Baines as a teenager turned out to be a very rebellious child who likes going behind her parents' back to do dangerous things like drinking and smoking, which was a lot less frowned upon in 1955 than it is now and since 1985. Drinking and smoking is bad for your health. You shouldn't do it. Only people who are 21 and older are legally allowed to drink. Where I come from.
Be the first one on your block to say, yeah, forget it, Doc.
Claire Clayton was also a very well-rounded woman who shared Emmett Brown's interest with science and novels by Jules Verne. But yeah, I really appreciate the fact that Lorraine Baines is a headstrong girl who doesn't take any nonsense from Biff Tannen, 3D, Skinhead, or Match. And she doesn't like to be objectified. She is right to be mad at how predatory Biff Tannen is. Even in the Biff horrific 1985, she had the guts, the gall to call out Biff Tannen for not being a decent man like George McFly was. I also saw some subtle hints that George McFly was meant to be like a foil to Biff Tannen, because I guess Marty looked, to say the least, Marty seemed seems pretty disgraced that when he, as dad, when he found that George McFly was a peeping Tom, and that's how he got hit by the car of Lorraine's dad. Yeah, the thing is, George McFly and Biff Tannen were both boys who liked to perv on and crave on Lorraine Baines. However, unlike Biff Tannen, George McFly had the decency to at least try to ask Lorraine out like a gentleman once Marty McFly, under the pseudonym of Calvin Klein, put him up to the task. Yeah, the thing that gave Bob Gale the idea for Back to the Future was he saw his dad's old yearbook photo, and that made him wonder if he could have been friends with his father in high school. So that's why he wrote Back to the Future about Marty McFly becoming friends with his parents in high school after he drives backwards through time to 1955 and gives George McFly the confidence to ask Lorraine Baines out to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. And Gale never intended for this to be a trilogy because, well, all he really wanted to do was was to hope for the first Back to the Future film to make its money back. And to his surprise, Back to the Future did it. It set a world record, or at least it set a record. It set in America. It set
50 seconds later.
It set a world record, at least for the realm of American money, for being the highest grossing film of the year in which it premiered. In the highest grossing film of 1985, as I discussed earlier. But and definitely one of the highest grossing films of the 20th century. Maybe not the first highest most grossing, but it's definitely top 10. And no, I'm not adjusting for inflation when I talking records like this, and I also didn't adjust for inflation when I said the second and third Spy Kids films had twice the budget of the first Back to the Future film. However, I would also like to point out that the Spy Kids trilogy while never having the high box office numbers or wide distribution or viewership popularity as Back to the Future trilogy, still succeeded in making a large sum of money at the box office on a very low budget. And the Spy Kids movies went the other way from Back to the Future to prove you can succeed with just the right sort of A-list celebrities and cheesy, over-the-top CG special effects for just $35 million and $38 million. As long as you do not oversell or overuse them. Sure, they are a safe bet when it comes to making a big screen blockbuster hit, but it is an even safer bet to not overspend on these expensive, nice things, because that way you lose less money at the box office if it's not a hit. My point is, Spy Kids and Back to the Future know to not overspend on these resources either way, because what really matters is their marketing budget and how much they have left over to market their films once post-production is complete. What I mean is the Spy Kids movies could afford A-list celebrities and over-the-top special effects on a relatively low budget of $35 million and $38 million, which is a lot less than most modern superhero films' budgets. But yeah, I guess that is a timeless story that really resonates throughout the ages and the generations. You know, I have a heartfelt story about a kid who meets his or her parents in high school and does what he can to give them a healthier relationship and a more successful career in life. And Marty also had to fix his own future in that way when it came to the second and third Back to the Future films. Yeah, Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis did intend for Back to the Future to be a trilogy, but once the first Back to the Future film became the biggest surprise hit of 1985, they started working on the second and third films to figure out where they could take the Back to the Future films after that point. I thought the reason why it took 4 years to make Back to the Future 2 was because they were waiting until the final season of Family Ties, but it was actually because Robert Zemeckis was working on Who Framed Roger Rabbit without Bob Gale, so Bob Gale was left to write the first draft of Back to the Future Part 2 on his own. At first, Bob Gale had this idea that Dr. Emmett Brown and Marty McFly had to go follow old Biff to 1967 and show where Marty's parents were in their lives during the hippie movement at the beginning of the Vietnam War. But then Robert Zemeckis showed Bob Gale how they could really get creative, recycling a lot of plot elements and set pieces from the first Back to the Future film. They had to burn Biff's sports almanac without interfering with anything they did during the first film in 1955, when 1955 Emmett Brown was helping 1985 Marty McFly get back to the future or back to his present. So in this time around, the second Back to the Future film, 1985 Emmett Brown has come to 1955 with Marty McFly. Together they're on a mission to burn the sports almanac so Biff Tannen can't get rich and take over Hill Valley and murder George McFly in 1973. To make matters worse, Richard Nixon was still the president in his Biff horrific 1985. And the Vietnam War was still going on. Yeah, I noticed that in the newspaper that featured Emmett Brown being taken to a mental institution. It was very sad, but also very brilliant how they wrote the recasting of Crispin Glover. Crispin Glover didn't return for the second and third Back to the Futures, and they revealed George McFly was dead in the Biff horrific 1985. Also, when Marty McFly and Emmett Brown traveled back in time to 1955 in the second Back to the Future film, we get an additional scene of Lorraine Baines and Biff Tannen that I assume was happening at the same time as another scene of the first movie in 1955 where we're following Marty McFly and George McFly. Lorraine told Biff Tannen that she wouldn't marry him even if he had $1 million. I guess that's why the only way Biff Tannen could marry Lorraine was if he got so rich and powerful he could get away with marrying George McFly in 1973. It was so sad. George and his wife and their 3 children. Yeah. Hope this Back to the Future video essay doesn't become a whole trilogy of videos, but it easily could be with how much I didn't realize I had to discuss about Back to the Future. I thought it was really neat how you know Christopher Lloyd plays the main villain Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Charles Fleischer, he's a judge. Christopher Lloyd played Judge Doom, and Charles Fleischer voices Roger Rabbit, who is the main hero of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And even though I didn't share any scenes in Back to the Future Part 2, I still thought it was really neat that Robert Zemeckis brought back 2 Who Framed Roger Rabbit Easter eggs with him into Back to the Future Part 2. The first one was Charles Fleischer gets to appear in the same cast as Christopher Lloyd again because he plays a character in Back to the Future Part 2 named Terry. It's actually very easy for me to miss his scenes because one of them is in 2015 and then one is in 1955. But here it is. Here's the part where you actually see Charles Fleischer, the voice of Roger Rabbit, from Who Framed Roger Rabbit in Back to the Future Part 2. During the first act of Back to the Future Part 2, when Marty McFly, Jennifer Parker, and Emmett Brown are in 2015, Terry's the guy who does the same thing that Elsa Raven did in the first Back to the Future film, jingling around a aluminum can of money and asking Marty McFly to donate money to save the frozen clock tower. And he's also, unfortunately, the unwitting instigator of doom who sees the big announcement about the Cubs winning the World Series and tells Marty McFly that he would, if he could go back in time, he would bet money on the Cubs to win that year, which is what started the whole chain of events in Back to the Future Part 2, where Marty McFly buys a sports almanac and then Emmett Brown throws it in the trash, and then 2015 Biff finds it. Okay, so the second scene where we see Terry, without all that old age makeup for 2015 is... Okay, so the other Terry scene is when he's playing... when Charles Fleischer plays Terry in 1955, he is Biff's mechanic who is arguing with him after... Biff's mad about the fact that the damage that it would cost $302.57 to repair the damage to his car.
Hey, what's up, Doc? Jumping without a parachute? Kinda dangerous, ain't it?
Yeah, you could get killed, huh?
And the second Easter egg related to Who Framed Roger Rabbit is that the tunnel Eddie Valiant goes into when he's in Toontown, that Robert Zemeckis got to film the same tunnel for the climax of Back to the Future Part 2 when Marty is in Biff's car and he's trying to grab the sports almanac from them, and they have the big fight. They're fighting over the sports almanac, and then Marty has to hoverboard away from Biff as he's driving after him and try to make it to the end of the tunnel, where Doc Brown can save him with a rope of those colored flags you see at car dealerships. They got stuck in the DeLorean in an earlier 1955 scene.